So this is the second attempt. This is going to be my second attempt. Um, Actually, secretly, this is my third attempt. I did do one before, not a full one. Didn't really work out. Then thought I recorded the ultimate session, and clearly there was an error. Something had happened. So third time lucky, I'm hoping. So this is session two, and in this session two, we are focusing on um, relationships as infrastructure. So essentially, this kicks off the day, and after we've done like the reconnecting, recapping, like we kick off the day with this. And the aim is to do a bit of kind of like sense making, recapping, like reminding ourselves of the things that we've talked about across the academic year, but also in addition to that, to really think about relationships as organizational infrastructure. Right, so we've talked about it as kind of like infrastructure as a network across like people, the things that connect us. What I want to, I guess, kind of prime our partners in the room for is the session later, which is to very much think about leading this piece of work. And so we're going to do a bit of kind of provocation, like reminding ourselves of like what we believe, and getting them to kind of get under the bonnet of like sustaining relationships, repairing relationships, what happens when it ruptures, and so on. So we want to kick off with like reminding ourselves that like when families engage with school, what do they bring with them? Like, and it's like really clear that what they bring with them is a history. Um, they bring kind of previous rupture with the school or any other institution for that matter, as well as some of these other things listed here. And this won't be like unfamiliar to those who are in the room, but just a reminder that what happens is we often as organizations are interacting with families in the present tense about something that is happening right now, about our relationship we have with them now, or if, for example, it's the first time we're meeting with a family or we're a new head teacher in that school, that we understandably are focused on the present tense. Often what we don't do is think about families' experience of the school or the institution historically. So just a reminder that like this is what they bring with them, and that the relationship between schools and families are not necessarily neutral, and we are constantly negotiating that relationship with families. Like it's constant, and so like this reminder and perhaps saying that this, we have explored this across this year. We're not telling you something new, but to really keep this in mind. Then an activity here, which we're going to get them individually or in groups or pairs to describe the reasons why relationships can weaken over time. So just a bit of a brain dump here. Like, let's just get it all down. What are all the reasons that relationships can weaken over time? We pull on like examples that we've experienced ourselves, as well as things that we know of, or perhaps we can imagine happening too. And then we'll have two bits of kind of flip charts, sugar paper, placed at different parts of the room, and they get to put on their using their post-it notes where they think that reason sits. Does it sit with the individual, or does it sit with the organization? Now, this would be really interesting actually, because if we use the example of someone who has called home and had a really bad phone call, family. They've just managed the conversation poorly. We could argue that the reason why the relationship weakens over time is because the phone call home from this particular member of staff seems to rupture that relationship over and over again. And so, therefore, like the relationship with the school as a whole becomes quite weak. Now, we could argue that's the individual, but there is also an argument that that's organizational as well. Like, has that individual had the relevant professional development, and so on? So, like, there's no kind of, it's not a cop out, but there's no like right or wrong here. It'll be interesting to see what emerges from this. I'm sure there will be people in the room that says, "Oh, well, no, it sits in both," and so on. But it's a useful discussion point, I think. And then we're going to move into relational coordination, which is actually, yeah, it's useful to think about the individuals, but also to think about the whole system, or the whole structure, as a whole, and to think that as leaders, like, it's our role to like develop this like relational leadership with our staff. And what we want our staff to do is to develop the kind of relational practice that is going to support them in the work that they do with families. And so the relational coordination is how we develop really strong relational practice between co-workers slash staff slash teachers, support staff, etc., and how that manifests as relational co-production. So like this kind of strong relationship between the staff and families. So the aim is, what we're doing is we're moving away from this idea that this kind of heroic um, individual who is excellent at kind of doing the relationships piece, to move into a point where, if not all, the vast majority of staff are very good at this relational coordination. Um, and because, like healthcare, for example, school systems are interdependent systems. They're highly interdependent systems. And so therefore, it requires a lot of relational coordination, and it needs relational leadership as well. And one of the things that we've got to really think about is how we reframe relational success. The assumption is, I think often, is we build a really strong relationship, we gain real trust, and it's all a success. It's like this kind of linear route to success. The argument or the pushback to that is, the reality is very different. When we start a relationship with a family, especially families who perhaps are untrusting of institutions based on their previous experiences or their own experiences, that you come into that relationship with a clear difference. That difference creates tension, but potentially that tension creates misunderstanding. And so what needs to happen is a process of negotiation between the family and the school. Compromise and negotiation. How do you meet each other kind of halfway? Only then can you then begin to build trust. And then when you build trust, you may begin to see success. When that happens, that doesn't necessarily mean it will stick. The messiness of relationships is that there's a high likelihood there's going to be rupture, especially with families who are living in complexity. And so repair becomes incredibly important. And so what we might end up doing is having to do a bit of rupture and repair, go back to difference, tension, misunderstanding, and so on. If we are mindful of this, if we're really aware of that, then how do we support staff not only to build relationships, but also have the skills to repair relationships when they rupture as well? So let's do a bit of like, what does rupture actually look like in schools? So what organizations become really good at is, we're very good at the kind of quite technical organizational stuff, like escalation processes, who's accountable for what, how do we document a meeting when it's happened, or conversation when it's happened, etc., etc. I think what we're not as good at doing, not to say we don't do it, but is be routinely coordinated around repair, rebuilding trust, reconciliation, etc. So, like, I think this is something that schools can be better at. It's not to say it doesn't happen, but there's less rigor or robustness with this. And so, what happens when a relationship breaks down, and what then makes that repair difficult? So, put out a question: what makes repair difficult? Get them to speak amongst themselves about kind of what makes repair incredibly difficult. Um, and then we'll do a bit of like, well, repair becomes impossible when vulnerability feels unsafe, right? And so many reasons for that, both for families or individuals, as well as organizations as well, right? We can see that like organizations want to protect their image over honesty. Now, that's not to say it's malicious, but talk about kind of um, what's the term I'm looking for? Um, like professional integrity, professional kind of respect, um, the wanting to be seen uh, as an organizational institution of kind of trust. What you don't want to do is say that you got it wrong or say you made a mistake. Um, Although we know that actually that's a great way to build relationships. So repair becomes difficult when these things emerge in trying to repair them. People don't want to be blamed. Communication doesn't focus on problem solving, it focuses very much on who's to blame and so on. And then we want to throw a question out there: what sustains relationships? When you have a relationship, like what sustains it? I'm pulling on the paper from Bolton, Logan, and Cattell. We There are several systems that focus that can be really useful in um, sustaining relationships or encouraging repair. So shared meetings that feel that don't feel hierarchical, right? So it's what we mean when we're referring to shared meetings. The meetings do not feel hierarchical; they're shared meetings. We come to this to work together rather than to be told. That also includes shared accountability. That we all have a responsibility and a set of accountabilities in this process of working with the child. That we have real intentional repair conversations, that our communication and information flow is really clear, transparent, and frequent, and also our transition structures where handover of relationships is really strong as well. So what we want them to do is think, all right, so like these things perhaps do happen in your school. So describe them, describe what they currently look like, and describe how they sustain relationships and how they repair relationships. Let's do a bit of celebration of things we're already doing, but potentially there's an opportunity here for them to point out any gaps that they might have. Then we have this 15-minute activity where they kind of do a bit of exploration of a specific relationship, partnership, or area of relational work they've been doing across this year. So, what progress have they made? And where they're most proud of building like relational capacity? What deliberate practices or structures currently prevent tensions? Where did a relational breakdown occur for them? And what one change will they implement to strengthen their long term capacity for change in like relational capacity? So they're gonna do this for 15 minutes and perhaps do a bit of sharing afterwards. So that's what we have. I really hope this saves successfully. I'm going to click finish here. Please, God, do not make me record this again.